It is kind
Thanks, Mark. Pleasure being here.
of lots of discussions over the years here about, various things around cyber and processes and risk and all that sort of stuff. And being in the healthcare industry, that kind of ranks at the top of the most wanted list, I guess, for the attack. So, what sort of insights do you have for dealing with those threats that's constantly hitting the healthcare industry?
Yeah, healthcare is a huge target, part of critical infrastructure, as you know, and there's a lot of focus on the data that we have, right? So all healthcare providers and service providers and others, payers, just a wealth of data that is valuable to threat actors. And it is definitely something that we see every day, right? We protect against every day to make sure that we're as resilient as we can be around it. So you know, a lot of additionally, in addition to the PHI and the personal information that we have and hold for quite a few patients, um, also seeing an increase in attack vectors around compromised credentials, people trying to get credentials to get into the system in any way they can. So it's not always just a brute force attack anymore. It's always, how can the bad guy get in the easiest way possible? So we're definitely seeing that, as I know many other healthcare providers are seeing that as well, and other organizations too.
Yeah, and with those threats, it comes, internally those challenges of securing, legacy systems. I was in healthcare for 6 or 7 years, and those, I think the common word now is around IoT, but those IoT devices might be a MRI or a CT or something along that line. It's
Yeah.
not some little TV that's sitting on someone's wall. So, you
Yeah.
know, it's definitely a challenge. And so, how are you dealing with these legacy and IoT systems to secure those? Now, don't give any secrets away, obviously, but it's what's your approach there?
Yeah. No, yeah. So it is definitely a threat, right? I mean, if you think about it, large health system, we have thousands of network connected devices on the network at any one point in time. And we really just follow kind of a layered security model and a security approach to it, right? So we have segmentation in place where we're segmenting those assets away from other assets. We have various controls in place. We're leveraging tools around monitoring for fingerprinting of those devices, right? So a key challenge, especially in the healthcare environment, is really understanding what's connected to the network and when and why. And that's really the same with any network for that matter. But healthcare devices specifically, there are solutions out there, Clarity and other kinds of solutions that are used to that can help fingerprint and identify devices easily, right? So, an infusion pump looks like this, a MRI machine looks like that, a CAT scan machine looks like this. Um, and so we leverage those in concert with segmentation rules and automation to basically, segment those devices off where we can, and keep them away from the rest of the environment, right? So that it's what I would say the typical security onion of how do you continue to protect layer by layer by layer, ultimately down to the crown jewels in the organization. So it is definitely a challenge, right? I mean, with an organization the size of the BJC Health System, like I said, thousands and thousands of devices that are connected at any one time. We have a great clinical asset management team that we partner with. Biomedical sometimes is how they're referred to, and for other healthcare organizations. And they do an awesome job on maintenance and making sure that we have preventative maintenance, and then also understanding where those devices are, keeping them as up to date as possible. Manufacturers have a challenge with getting updates out, and that's not unique to us. It's actually an industry-wide problem. So far, so much to the point CISA has actually, started some programs to push for product security, and not just in healthcare devices, but other kinds of manufacturing devices, and IoT devices, to really raise the bar on that, and to make sure that when you're buying something, it is able to be updated. You understand what the bill of materials are and what the software is that's being used inside of it. So there's been some progress made. I think we still have a long way to go as an industry, but I think we do a pretty good job with a lot of the traditional layered security approaches.
Yeah, and I'm sure part of that is, to use the industry loved term of zero trust. I'm sure that you incorporate those principles as well as industry best practices, which is really what zero trust is just actually implementing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're definitely on the path of zero trust, and using that as a strategy and an approach, right? And leveraging really our endpoint, our data, the identity, the combination of where those three meet, and understanding, okay, this is what systems get access to what people get access to what data should be traversing over what networks, all those kinds of things. So it's important to do, to move toward that zero trust model wherever you can and leverage that. Absolutely.
So I know we could definitely talk more about that, but I also want to kind of dig into, the whole education of healthcare professionals. When I was in healthcare and running the IT department at a large healthcare group, it was at the time we were going to electronic medical records, so they did not want to give up their pens, and paper and stuff. So I would hope that it's more acceptable now. So how are you educating these healthcare professionals that they just want to focus on the care, obviously, and which they should be doing, versus that around cybersecurity? It's hard enough to get them trained on the things, right? But how do you get them to be secure while doing that?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We've transitioned from it was difficult to get EMR systems in place, and challenges with change management and things, and now it's impossible to get the systems out of a clinician's hand, right? So, case in point, I know there's been several kinds of some different events and security incidents and things across various healthcare providers, and one of the biggest things we hear is people don't know how to read cursive handwriting anymore. Right? And so it's just interesting that it just completely switched to, no, we rely on these systems for everything. And that's absolutely true. And so, uptime is of the utmost importance, and then making sure that, to your point, the clinician's job and their primary focus is the patient that they're working with, right? They're looking to provide them the best outcome possible for their health. And everybody, we call our clinicians caregivers, because everyone is a caregiver, whether that's a person in the cafeteria to a person who's helping be a nurse, or to a physician, whoever it is. And so it's sometimes difficult to get the attention span of those individuals to say, this is why this is important, and why I sent you a phishing simulation email. It's not to trick you. It's not to get you in trouble. It's really just to help educate you, not only on the professional front, but on the personal side of the house too, to say, hey, what you learn here can be applied in your personal life, and should be applied in your personal life too, right? So changing your password, having good password strength, and all the things that we say traditionally for security awareness are absolutely important. For us, it's been getting the attention span, making sure that we're leveraging the communication paths that are established, right? So a lot of hospitals and healthcare provider organizations have very specific procedures around how do policies get distributed, how do they get updated, how do they get trained on. There's also routine communications and ways to communicate. It's not email, right? Not all the time. It's sometimes it's the intranet site, sometimes it's a direct piece of poster that's sitting on the floor or something like that. So we employ a variety of methods to kind of get the message across and make sure that the key messages that we need to deliver out there, and that we're not doing that at the same time as we're not overburdening the clinicians, right? Again, their time needs to be spent with the patients. It doesn't need to be spent typing on a computer or doing a training course. And so there's things that we do to try to minimize that. We try to incorporate smaller, quicker training sessions, if you will, right? So phishing simulation is a great example. If there's a problem and you accidentally fail one, you get an immediate 2-minute course. It's literally 2 minutes. It doesn't take longer than that. And then, we also try to coordinate all of our ongoing annual training and the requirements around that with other annual training that goes along. And we make sure to keep that as short and to the point as possible, just to give them the salient points. So there's a lot, it's a big problem. I would just say in general of getting the word out and helping people understand why. And so I'd say the other piece that I spend a lot of my time on is really visiting with different parts of the organization and actually sitting with leadership teams, sitting with other teams across the organization to say, here's why we do what we do. Here's a day in the life of security. Here's why we're doing these things. And here's what, my ask of you is. And it's typically one ask. And it's, if you see something, say something. And it's their old adage, right? And that's because, the more signal we get, the more information we get, no matter if 500 people have reported it, I don't care. I want to know about it, right? And I want my team to know about it so we can figure out if there's something going on. So that's typically my ask of everybody that I talk to is, if you see something, say something. Speak up, because we want to hear it. So it may not be the best way and the only way, but it's definitely the way we've been dealing with it.
Yeah, communication is definitely key, and whether it's with other parts of IT or operations or legal or however, it's a matter of keeping that communications. And sounds like you're doing a great job of sitting down and working with them and talking to them on a regular basis and stuff, which is important. So with that, some of the most critical cybersecurity threats out there facing healthcare today, you're communicating those threats with leadership and with other parts of the organization, but how do you prioritize those threats and the mitigations around that in the healthcare environment, where you have, as we mentioned earlier, those IoT devices on top of the normal IT systems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'd like to say I would hope we're typical of other organizations. I think we have a good approach to vulnerability management, patch management, and those kinds of capabilities. I think, for me and for us, it's really, what is the risk to our environment and what compensating controls do we have or do we not have in place as we evaluate risks and things that come up. And so, we're regularly looking at all the threat intelligence and all the different things that comes in across multiple channels. We're regularly scanning and doing vulnerability assessments. We're regularly doing penetration tests, and we're also regularly doing purple team exercises. And so, amongst all that signal, we're going to get a bunch of stuff that we need to fix, and we know that, right? No organization is perfect. And I will say, no organization can fix 100% of everything. And so it's important to be able to prioritize and focus on what's the most exploitable, the most urgent thing that doesn't have a compensating control in place that we need to take action on. And then having robust processes after that to actually execute on those changes, right? So we have a really close relationship with our technology services organization, otherwise known as infrastructure operations and other organizations. But we have a really close relationship with end user computing and the folks that are doing the patches on the desktops, the desktop team themselves, right? The clinical asset management team, if it comes to a clinical asset. So it's really, it's a risk-based approach. If I had to summarize all of that, it's understanding our environment, the compensating controls, where those crown jewels are, and if that threat is going to pose a risk to that, and then what do we need to do and take action on? That could be anywhere from patch a system. It could be take a system out of the mix. It could be, shut a vendor connection down. It could be anything, right? And we take all of those things into account when we evaluate risk.
Yeah, and you know, you do that on a day-to-day basis, and then all of a sudden you get an announcement that, hey, we're going to buy or merge with another company, and I know you've had that lovely experience here recently, and so
Yeah.
what are for those that haven't been in a M&A type process, and especially it's one thing in a smaller company, which is hard enough as that, but to be in a large organization such as BJC to merge with another large organization, what's some of the risk on emerging that technology that you face, and what recommendations do you have people out there on securing your organizations when you are combining two groups together and not wanting to have a issue like what was it, Marriott had or whoever when they merged with theirs, and then something legacy sitting out there that was phoning home to China or something like that. So how do you handle all that? That's got to be pretty overwhelming on top of the normal day-to-day stress of a CISO.
So it is overwhelming, or can be overwhelming, and I'd like to use just a quote from Adam Savage from his YouTube video, one of his YouTube videos recently, where he said, "Hey, we are, when you're overwhelmed and you can't figure out, when you have so much on your plate, you just need to know what's the next first step, right? Or and how do we move forward with that?" And so, to me, you really need, when you're going into an M&A situation, you really need to have an understanding of what is your vision, what is the North Star that you're looking for from a security program perspective. And to me, that's, how do you make sure you're using the best of both worlds of both organizations? Because both organizations are going to bring great things to the table. And then both organizations are going to bring baggage to the table, right? And so it's important to understand that, and to really pick the high water mark wherever possible, to say, what, we're not going to compromise security just because we think we have a better solution on one side of the fence or the other, right? So to me, it's really having that as the mantra of, like, we're going to do what's right for the organization. We're not going to do what's right just because one side or the other side wants to do it. And so I think that's key. I think the other piece to it is, prior to M&As, is doing appropriate due diligence and making sure, where you can, digging into compliance material, to previous risk assessments, to current penetration test results, all those kinds of things, vulnerability scan results, really to understand what are you both getting into, and what does the landscape look like on the other side of the fence. And granted, due diligence processes can differ, and there are certain things you can't be shared prior to close and that kind of thing. But a lot of times, as long as you have a good structured program and a legally backed program with outside counsel and everything, there are ways to be able to evaluate some of those things, or have someone evaluate them for you if you're not allowed to see the data. So I'd say due diligence is key, right? And then, to me, the other important piece is, after you close, right, as soon as you can, you need to do risk assessments, and you need to do consistent risk assessments and consistent penetration tests across the environment, right? And make sure you have a full list of everything and all the problems that you might see out there on both sides of the fence. And then that really helps you build your day 0, day 90, day 360 plans for implementation. From there, once you kind of have that risk posture set, and you understand what the top risks are and the top vulnerabilities and what your action plan needs to be immediately, then it's all about rationalization, right? And what are those things that you need to be thinking about around, well, now we may have 2 SIMs. What do we need to do with that, right? Or we have maybe 2 separate EDR solutions. What do we want to do with that? And there may or may not be good reasons to consolidate those, depending on your specific situation. But where possible, I think you need to consolidate and rationalize and simplify wherever you can. But there might be situations where it doesn't make sense initially to do that. So it's kind of like any other strategy and roadmap build, right? You need to build a roadmap. You kind of need to do what the day zero stuff is, the day 100, the day beyond, and then try to break that out into as far out as you can in the planning and start to set the stage for what is it going to take to integrate the two organizations together.
Yeah, I know the last one, and this was a decade and a half ago that I went through. The big issue that we had on the merger was afterwards was finding out that they never bought licenses for anything, and so then you had like this big massive licensing purchase that wasn't part of the the expense ratios and everything that we were expecting out of that. So and so you had almost immediate liability risk that you had to deal with, and so that was challenging, and definitely should. I always make sure that's at the top of the list of any sort of risk analysis. There is that licensing component of that. So
I think licensing is important. I'd also say, sorry to interrupt, but the other piece would be the just the overall operating expenses, right? Mm-hmm. So in general, most M&As are done because there are synergies that are anticipated, right? Mm-hmm. And while security may be a cost center to many organizations, and mostly is all the time, we have to be good stewards of the organization and the organization's funds and finances. And so we need to make sure, we are participating and doing what we can to reduce expense, to consolidate, to realize some of those operating savings where possible.
Yeah, definitely. So, with all the stuff that you've gone through, is there one or two big lesson learns that you came out of with this one, or maybe some other M&A activity you've had in the past?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'd say in general, I would say it's the due diligence phase, and not necessarily this one, but just using my prior experience. I think it's making sure you understand as good as you can, as much as you can, around what's available, what the real capabilities are, what the real risks might be, and establishing that clearly up front, and then setting the stage with the executive team and the folks that are doing the M&A activity and coordinating it to help them understand, like, here's what we believe it's going to take to really do this right. Right? Versus coming after the fact to say, oh, we had these surprises, now it's going to cost X instead of Y. That's a hard pill to swallow, right? So as much as you can do up front, that's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, and whether it's during or after an M&A or just in your day-to-day processes, the constant evaluation of your security controls and identifying areas of improvement. What's your approach on doing that? In your years of managing budgets and security risk and everything. What's your approach on evaluating the effectiveness of your controls and areas of improvement?
Yeah, we have several ways we do that, and several ways I'd recommend doing that. So one, there's the maturity scores. Some people argue that they're not as valuable. I think they're pretty valuable when it comes to process and people, to understand where are we at on the maturity scale. And even if it's not perfect, as long as it's notionally correct, right, to be able to say, we know we need to fix something in incident response, or we know we need to fix something in identification of assets, or whatever it might be, right? So I think the assessment phase is absolutely important, to understand your vulnerabilities or your concerns from a maturity perspective. Control effectiveness is another one. I mean, healthcare is a very highly regulated industry, and so we have multiple things we need to do around HIPAA security, around credit card PCI security, around We have a school, a nursing school under the BJC umbrella, and so we have GLBA, right? So there's other frameworks that require us to evaluate effectiveness of controls, and making sure that we have third parties and ourselves self-attesting and looking at those things. So the more you can do around just getting into that regular rigor around just traditional control testing and validation, right? Whatever you say you do, are you really doing it as an organization? And you can do that in inexpensive ways, or you can do that in expensive ways through third parties. It's kind of up to the organization. But so I'd say, it's the maturity assessments, it's the control effectiveness testing and auditing. And then I would say continuous testing and monitoring, right? So everything changes every single day. And so making sure that you have good threat intelligence and understand who's coming after you and why. What are the motives of those threat actors ultimately? And then pretending to be like them and doing blue team, red team, purple team exercises, doing penetration tests on a routine basis, not just on your external environment, everywhere. And prioritizing on those crown jewels that you might be having across whatever organization or industry you're in. So that's kind of how I think about it. I mean, I think it's multi-pronged, multifaceted. It's kind of that old plan, do, check, act, mantra of audit and attestation is just, we say we're going to do something. Did we actually do it? Are we verifying we did it? And then what do we do when something's broken? And what do we need to do to fix it? So those are the things. That's kind of how I would summarize that.
Yeah, and in a regulated industry, I'm in banking, and so I can't turn around without an auditor or somebody, behind me, which might be one now. I don't know, but so I totally get that. So yeah, I totally get it. So let's kind of change it up here a little bit and have a couple more fun questions here versus serious questions. So what is something in the security industry that we could do better? You hear a lot of different things that's happening stuff, but what is something that you think the industry itself could do better?
Gosh, how do we put? I would love for security as a whole to be able to make something that resonates with all the social media people out there, right? And I'm sure you see it too. On all the social media outlets, Facebook and all that stuff, I always see friends. I see people talking about stuff or pushing junk that is obviously spam and obviously malicious and things. But quite honestly, a lot of us as security professionals, whether or not it's just we're tired of dealing with it every day or whatever, we don't say something in those areas to say like, hey, this is bad, this is malicious, and here's why. Right? We're not being alarmists and things like that, but we're just giving you facts of, hey, this thing doesn't make sense and you shouldn't probably do that. Right?
But it's every other post, though. You can't do that for right?
I know. But I mean, so and I would say the other piece is how can we focus on the aging community? I don't say elderly anymore because I got in trouble one time. But the aging community, because not everybody, all this technology is not second nature for everybody, right? And so people just don't understand. They don't understand, why do I need to get a text to my phone every time I log into something, right? I mean, it's just that general education doesn't seem to be making it to our general community and population. So somehow I'd love to fix that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, and fraud is just continuing to rise. I mean, I see our reports from our customers that's been defrauded, that's needing help, to block things on their transactions on their accounts and that sort of things. And I mean, it's just constantly throughout the day, and no matter how much we try to educate off of it, there's always something. And let's be frank, I mean, the fraudsters are really, really good. It's not like the old days of, misspelled stuff. It hasn't been like that for a long time. And they are really, really good. And it's even the best people gets, fraud, gets caught in the scam. So it's
Yep.
really hard. So, other than the social media component of this, what are you tired of hearing about in the industry?
Oh, artificial intelligence. So I'm probably going to regret saying this, but I really.
It's been pretty unanimous, I think, of everyone I've been talking to.
Oh, goodness. I mean, AI is wonderful. It's a really cool technology. And I think it has a lot of benefits that we could leverage in the security space, especially, right? There's companies coming out now around automating SOC evaluations and, the security operations center evaluation and things like that. Just some really cool use cases coming out. Large language model, incredible, right? And useful, as long as you double check and are actually using your knowledge. But I think that, all of this uncertainty about AI and, oh my gosh, what do we need to do? We need all these policies and all these things and all these risk frameworks. I get it. But my perspective is that, AI is another technology. And we need to understand what it's doing, why it's doing it, what are the controls that are around it, and how are we keeping data private, right? And as long as we understand that and understand how to implement controls around it and do it in a proper way, to me, it's another great technology that we can implement. And so again, I might regret saying all that, but I think that it's definitely a game changer, but it's also, I'm getting tired of hearing about it.
Yeah. And when it comes down to it, it's really how is it managing or manipulating data or providing. So if you have a strong data governance, data DLP program, then it is just another tool, whether it's Power BI or OpenAI. It doesn't matter. It's just another tool that's accessing, utilizing that data. So that might be oversimplistic way of looking at it, but I think it's a good starting place.
I think the key piece, and to be fair, from a healthcare point of view, we have to be very careful when AI is targeted to be used for, diagnosis or something of that nature, where we still need physicians to do their jobs, and we need people to make sure that the tool might be telling you this, and it might be absolutely correct. But somebody needs to be there to validate that, whether that's on the back end through an audit of some sort or front end or whatever it might be. So the right kinds of thing, so don't get me wrong, we're doing the right kinds of things around that and making sure that we have the right controls and the right validation behind anything we might be considering there. But it's it's definitely something that we can we're going to see what happens. It's going to be great.
Yeah. So since we're still in January of 2025, what are some of the trends that you see that happening here this year?
Oh my! I think back to the AI thing, even though I'm tired of hearing about it. I think we're going to see a huge shift in a variety of tooling, a variety of technology. It's already happening, but there's going to be a lot of people coming to market, especially in the security space, around how can we speed up the detection, speed up getting to the needle in the haystack, as we're looking for situations and concerns. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for disruption in the managed services space potentially. I don't know how quickly that'll hit, but I think we'll start to see that this year. And I think, outside of that, I'd say identity threats are just almost overwhelming sometimes, right? So whether that be personal fraud or compromised credentials at an organization or whatever, there's let's just face it, with all the breaches that have been out there, everyone in the United States has had their data exposed in some way, shape, or form, more than likely. And that means bad guys have a lot of data to do things with, and so they're going to use that and leverage it. They'd be stupid not to. So I think we're going to continue to see that, and I think there's going to be a huge challenge around identity proofing and what is good enough versus what's perfect, and how do we truly validate a person's identity when they're not physically in front of us, right?
Yeah.
And even if they're physically in front of us, how do we validate what they're giving us as a real credential too?
Right.
I think that's going to be a huge challenge this year.
Yeah, I agree. And anytime you put it in electronic mode, it makes it so much more difficult for that verification and stuff. So, well, Matt, I appreciate it. I enjoyed the talk as always. Thank you so much for being on the show, and look forward to having you another time. So, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Marc.